Well, what a joy it is to be with you all again here this morning. Maybe the reason for me being here isn't the most ideal with Pastor Paul having to be at home today, but I'm excited to be here, and that when he texted me, I was like, yes, I am free that Sunday. I can come and fill in for you. And so I'm going to be continuing where I left off last time that I was here. I preached a sermon on the Beatitudes, and so just continuing down that same train of thought, continuing the Sermon on the Mount, this message that Jesus gave. We're going to keep going on verses 13 through 16 in Matthew 5, where Jesus talks about being salt and light. And so I looked over to Suzanne, and when you guys were doing the faith foundations, when Mel gave those, I'm like, oh, there was my sermon. But you're going to get to hear it again, maybe a little more, the same sort of message of what our lives are to look like as believers and followers of Jesus Christ. But before getting into this, I remember at some point when I was a teenager, we did family devotions at the dinner table most every night. And one of the devotions ended with, I think it was on this exact passage, I believe. And it ended with the application of being a salty Christian. And now, the word salty in the world, if you were to look it up online, you'd probably find something like angry or resentful as the definition of what it means to be salty. I even saw a video the other day. Somebody's like, I'm really salty about this. And it's not what the passage here is talking about. To be salty by the world standard is something very different than what we're going to look at today. So it's important to realize salt has multiple different ways of looking at it. You can look at it as something that gets rubbed in a wound and makes it painful. That's kind of the idea that the world has when they use the word salty. But today we're going to look at what it means like to be a Christian and to be salt, and what it means to be light as a Christian. So we're looking verses 13 through 16, and it's Jesus speaking to his disciples. And what he's just gone through in the Beatitudes, what I spoke on last time, is Jesus explaining as Christians who we are in our relationship to God, right? Because we're blessed, and that's who we are before God. We are blessed by God because of all these different aspects of who we are. And now in these verses, he continues to explain who we are, but rather than explaining who we are in our relationship to God, he's explaining who we are in our relationship to the world around us. So that's what we have in these verses. And so let's read through it. I'm going to read through the entire passage, and then we will go through it piece by piece throughout this sermon. So verse 13, he says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." All right, before really diving into all the different aspects of what it means to be salt and light, I want to first point out a few implications that we have, things that are implied by this passage. So first, we have some implications about the state of the world that we live in. First of all, when we look at salt, we see that the world is in a state of rotting and decay. Because back in those days, salt wasn't used solely for flavor like it maybe is now, but they didn't have refrigerators. And so salt was used as a preservative to preserve their food, to preserve their meat largely. And so what salt was meant to do is it's meant to preserve. So when we look at being salt in the world, we see that the world is in a state of rotting and decay. And the other part of this is that the world lacks flavor. And by this, I'm saying that the world is missing something. They're searching for something. The world's always searching for the next great thing, the next piece of fulfillment. I relate it kind of, maybe you're familiar with the term of doom scrolling on a phone, where you just are, when you have, TikTok is popular, Instagram, Facebook, any of those things, and when you're just scrolling through looking for the next thing, and maybe none of what you're seeing on your feed is all that interesting, but you keep going in search of something that will interest you more and keep your attention for a little bit more time. And they're designed to be that way. And there's so much within the world that is also this way, where we're just moving on, looking for this next thing. That's how it operates. But that's not what it's meant to be. So those are some implications we can see about the world. And then we also see from the part about being a light in the world, is that the world in which we live is in darkness. Isaiah 9 verse 2 implies this when Isaiah prophesies about a light coming to a world of darkness and people living in a land of darkness. And then John 3:19 also speaks of how people love the darkness rather than the light because the darkness hides their actions. And so there's this idea that we live in a world of darkness, in a world that is rotting and decaying and does not have any flavor. The world likes to talk about things as if we're enlightened. This was something that when I think of light, you have this word enlightened, like to have knowledge of something. And people think that. We've reached the age of enlightenment, and we've moved beyond that. We're learning so many new things. We learn so many things, and oftentimes it can almost feel like, what is there left to explore? But despite all this knowledge that we've gained, whether it's in science or philosophy or any other area that you can explore, despite all of that, there's still problems in this world. The knowledge we've gained hasn't actually solved anything. And then one final implication is about the state of us. What this implies about us, that we're salt and light. And if we're salt and light in a world that is rotting and decaying and that is darkness, that means that we are inherently different than everything around us. We aren't going to be the same because we are completely different. And it's important to note in this that it's not that we are different because of just the actions that we do, but it's because of who we are as followers of Christ. You are light and you are salt. And now though light and salt have these things that they do, that they accomplish, right? Salt without its saltiness is useless. But if you are salt, you are different. We are inherently different than the world, and that is something that we shouldn't avoid, but that we should lean into and recognize and embrace. And so now, what does it mean? We're going to go through verse 13 here. You are the salt of the earth. What does it mean for us to be salt? What does that look like? And so as we touched on, salt's a preservative. And so as Christians, what does it mean for us to be a preservative in the world? It means that we are to live in such a way that is different and it affects the world around us to be preserved. Now, I'm not saying necessarily in terms of salvation, at least right now, but that the way we live should be different enough that it causes other people to also adjust how they act too. An example of this in my life, we had a youth group event where we were in Waupun with a group called Youth for Christ. And that group had a bunch of youth who were not very church. They hadn't grown up in church at all. And we were there with them, and we were playing this game in the Waupun County, in the county park in Waupun. And we were in the forest. I don't remember what game we were playing, but a bunch of kids, I was with a few kids, and we were all in a circle, and somebody started handing out cigarettes, and they were all lighting them and smoking. And I was I was probably like a sophomore in high school. I was a very quiet kid. I wasn't really the type of person to say anything. So my reaction to this was to just turn around and walk away and leave. But what this caused to happen is that two other kids followed me and came with me. The one kid smoking his cigarette still, and he's like, "Why are you leaving?" And I didn't even have to speak up because the other guy who was with me was like, oh, he doesn't like that everybody's smoking. And so the result of this was that they both threw down their cigarettes, stomped them out, and we continued on. And now this isn't necessarily how it always works. There are going to be times when the world fights back and pushes back. But when we live in a way that is righteous, people around us see it and they recognize it, and they will adjust how they act to match it many times. This isn't always, but this is a way in which we preserve the world by just living it out in our lives. And then we also add flavor to the world. You see, like I talked about, the world doom scrolls through life. They just move through with no purpose. But we bring a purpose. We bring a reason for living in Jesus Christ. And that we are seeking to live and glorify Him. And so in a world that is always searching for the next pleasure, we have a direction that we are going. And we bring that to the world. A purpose for our living. A joy in our living. And then in verse 14, it says, you are the light of the world. Now, Isaiah prophesied, I mentioned the passage already in chapter 9 of Isaiah, verse 2, that a light is coming to the world that will shine in the darkness. And this light is Jesus. Jesus proclaims it himself in John 8, verse 12, when he says, it says in verse 12, again, Jesus spoke to them saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Jesus is saying that he is the light of the world. But now here in verse 14 of Matthew, he says that you are the light of the world. That Christians, that his followers are the light of the world. And we are here to reflect the light that he has given us to the world. And what we see is that light does not discriminate about the situation that it is in. And by this I mean that light will always be light. If it's extremely dark, light still shines. If it's bright, light still shines. It does not change. And that's what Jesus is getting at. He's like, we don't hide a light. Light cannot be hidden. And so what does it mean to be a light? It means that first we reveal the state of man. This is what Jesus is talking, or what John is talking about in chapter 3 of John, verse 19 through 21. He says this, and this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people loved the darkness rather than the light, because their works were evil. For anyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed. But whoever does what is true comes to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that his works have been carried out in God. And what this is saying is that light reveals evil. It shows it. And if we are to be light, that is what we do. When you live righteously and when you speak righteousness, people will see it and they will not like it because it exposes the fact that what they are doing is wrong and evil. But then the other aspect of light is that we reveal the solution to this problem, the solution to the fact that works of man by themselves are evil. We reveal the solution as Jesus Christ, because he is that light that is shining out of us. In 2 Corinthians 2 verses, I'm just going to read verse 6. 2 Corinthians 4 verse 6. It says, for God who said, let light shine out of darkness, has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. The light that is in us is the glory of God revealed to us in the face of Jesus Christ. And that is what should shine. It is the gospel, the good news of Jesus. Because while this world has knowledge of all sorts of things, they know so much, we know so much about the world. The only knowledge that truly matters is our relationship with Jesus Christ. It is the knowledge of who he is and the bowing our knee to him and letting him reign in our lives. And that knowledge should not stay hidden within us, but should be shared with those around us. We don't put it under a basket, but we let it shine. Now, the order of these two are important. We have first the salt, and then we have that we are light. And this is because Jesus was very intentional with how he spoke, but too often our words will precede our actions. Right? We will say something before we actually live it out. For example, it's much easier for me to stand up here sharing the gospel with you and how we are to live. Much easier for me to do that than it is for me to go and live out the gospel very consistently in my life. It's easier to say something than to actually go and do it. But this is what we are to do. We're to be salt. We are to go live this out in our lives. We aren't to be, we're not to lose our saltiness, but we're to be different. We're to preserve the world with how we live. We're to live in such a way that lifts others up, in which we are doing righteousness. We are following God. We are doing good works. This is what we are called to do as believers. And we must do this, or else our words will lose their potency. People will see the church as a place of hypocrites. To a degree we are. We aren't perfect. We aren't going to live a perfect life. But we need to be seeking that and hungering after it. We need to be those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. So that those who look at us, that the world sees us, and they see people who live with hope and with purpose, with peace. And they want to know where that comes from. So that there's a desire within them to know, how do they have that? Where did they get that? And then secondly, this is a necessity. It's a necessity that as Christians we are salt and light. Jesus doesn't say, now as Christians, sometimes you are going to be the salt of the earth and other times you will be the light of the earth, but that is who you are. You see, salt without its saltiness is useless. It's not good for anything. It's just being thrown out and trampled under people's feet. They're not talking about melting ice. I don't know that they really got much ice to melt in Israel. We might do that now, but he's saying it's garbage. We throw it away and it just gets crushed and it's not used for anything. It's tossed out. Similarly, the Christian who does not live as such, just like salt without saltiness is tossed out, our actions are no different than the world. James says it bluntly when he says that faith without works is dead. It is pointless. When we do not live as God designed us to, as he called us to live, we are no good for anything. And the same goes for being a light. A light cannot be hidden. When growing up, we had a hill behind our house. And if you went up on this hill at night and you looked to the north, you'd see the lights of Oshkosh, and you looked to the east, you would see the lights of Fond du Lac, and to the south, you could see the lights of Waupun. All of these cities around us, you could see the light. It was not hidden. There was no way to hide it. Or in our house, if it's nighttime and all our lights are turned off, that's exactly when I see the light on our smoke detector, because light in the darkness is not going to hide. It shows up. Even the smallest light shows up when it's in a darkness, and we live in a world of darkness. So we won't be hidden, and we should also not attempt to hide it, because there certainly is a temptation to hide it. That's why Jesus addresses it here when he says, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. Now, God placed this light in us. He sent Jesus to bring light to the world, and now he makes us lights to the world through Jesus. And he's not going to do that to hide us. He's not going to give you faith and make you a believer in him, and then proceed to hide you away somewhere and not let you shine. He wants you to shine. But we have this temptation to hide our light. And Jesus is pushing back on that. He's saying, don't do that. Because when you look at it, it can seem a bit ridiculous to light a lamp and then to put a cover over it so that you don't see the light. So he's not hiding us, and we should not hide ourselves, but rather we should shine brightly in a dark world. Because that's what we are made to do, and we do it. And now the purpose of this. The purpose that God has made us salt and light for the earth. It says it in verse 16. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. The purpose isn't to point towards ourselves, but rather it's to point towards God. Our actions should point people to be, wow, that's amazing. And not to say, wow, that's amazing, you're such a great person, but rather they should point people to say, wow, that's amazing. God is doing something great in you. Look at what God has done. We should glorify the Father who is in heaven. So in conclusion, to kind of wrap this up, if you are a true Christian, you are salt and light. This is your relation to the world. You are different. You are meant to be salt. You're not useless. You have a purpose. And to let your light shine rather than hide it. Be different from the world around you and be bold in sharing your faith and in living it out. In a world of darkness, we should stand out. We shouldn't blend in. And if you haven't accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, come to Jesus, who was the first salt and light. He was the one who is different. He was the person who, as he lived his life, people looked at him and were like, wow, and they praised God. So be renewed and saved by the grace of God through the death and resurrection of Jesus, that you can become salt yourself, that you can live with flavor, with purpose, and that you are a light that shines brightly and boldly in a world of darkness. I want to finish with this quote from Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones, who sums it up really well. And I was like, I could try this. It's a long quote, so you'll have to bear with me. But he says it really well, and I didn't think I could say it any better. So when that's the case, you use what somebody else said. And he says this: we must function as men and women who have received from him life divine. He ridicules the opposite. He puts before us this wondrous picture of himself in this world. It was as men and women saw him that they were led to think of God. Have you noticed how often after his miracles we read that the people gave glory unto God? They said, we have never seen things like this before, and they glorified the Father. You and I are to live like that. In other words, we are to live in such a way that as men and women look at us, we shall become a problem to them. They will ask, what is it? Why are these people so different in every way? Different in their conduct and behavior, different in their reactions? There is something about them which we do not understand. We cannot explain it. And they will be driven to the only real explanation, which is that we are the people of God, children of God, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ. We have become reflectors of Christ, reproducers of Christ. As he is the light of the world, so we have become the light of the world. End quote. God has done this amazing work in our lives. And he's done it in that we are blessed in all these different ways that he lists in the Beatitudes. But then we have our relationship to the world and how we are then to live in this world. May we be salt and light to the world around us as we go forth this week. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for your word, that you share, speak to us through it, that we can grow in our knowledge of you, and that it may impact our life and change the way that we live, that we might live wholly for you, not live selfish lives seeking our own pleasures and such, but that rather we would live for you, knowing that you are all that we need and you are all that we desire. May that be true in our lives as we go forth this week. May we be salt and light to this world around us, to this world of rotting and decay, to this world of darkness. Give us the courage and strength to live that out. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.